This is the new Panasonic Lumix S1 Mark II, the new all-purpose hybrid camera in their professional S1 lineup, and it is packed full of features. We get a huge amount of recording options, a new partially stacked sensor, 3 types of raw video, internal 32-bit audio recording, improved image stabilization, improved autofocus options, Arri Log 3 support, and new picture profiles. So there is a huge amount going on here. So let's go through each area and try and break it all down a bit. So the first thing to understand is that today's releases make it very clear that this is Lumix's new generation of the S1 line. The S1 and S1R were launched 6 years ago now. Since then, we've had both the first and second generation of the S5 lineup, which are also fantastic cameras, but they're intended to be more affordable entry-level full-frame cameras for Lumix. The S1 is their more professional lineup. And at 6 years old, the S1 and S1R were starting to show their age, especially for video use. So now we have 3 cameras. The S1R Mark II, which was launched 2 months ago, the 44 megapixel high resolution hybrid, this camera, the S1 Mark II, which is the all-purpose workhorse, 24 megapixels partially stacked sensor for more faster performance and a really practical range of features. And then this, the S1IIE, a scaled back and more affordable model, which keeps a lot of the same features, but swaps the sensor out to what might be the same sensor as the S5 Mark II. So we have the more affordable entry point, the regular all-rounder, and the high resolution option, which is a really nice lineup with a clear kind of customer and work for each model. And as you might have noticed, all 3 cameras are identical from the outside. They all have this same physical design. The same grips, the same buttons and wheels, same batteries and card slots. Everything is identical apart from the logo. So swapping between them is going to be seamless for people who have more than one of these. So focusing back on the S5 Mark II, let's talk about the heart of the camera, this sensor. It's a partially stacked sensor. So this is now the second camera which we've seen come to market with this technology, behind the Nikon Z6 Mark III. It's possible, of course, that these are the same or similar sensors, which both brands are using. This partially stacked sensor is essentially a new way of getting the speed improvement of a stacked sensor design, which we've seen on quite a few of the other flagship cameras from each brand, but at a much lower cost. So cameras with this partially stacked technology are far outperforming the level at which they should be considering the price point of the camera. So it's a very interesting technology. Essentially what it means for the S1 Mark II though is much less rolling shutter, higher frame rates, and even better autofocus. Lumix are saying it has 15+ stops of dynamic range with dynamic range boost mode on, and that this is their highest dynamic range from a camera yet. We'll talk more about dynamic range boost in a bit, but considering Panasonic are normally one of the more conservative companies with quoting dynamic range numbers, this is quite impressive stuff. It's a dual native sensor as well. In Vlog, it's 640 and 5000, so low light and high ISO performance should be improved over their previous cameras like the S5 Mark IIX. Most of the discussion around this camera has been quite video focused, but let's quickly cover the still side of this camera, as it is just as relevant for photography as it is for video, of course. We get 24 megapixels up to 10 frames a second with a mechanical shutter, or a crazy 70 frames a second in bursts with no blackout in the viewfinder and continuous autofocus, and that's in electronic shutter mode. That is so fast for a camera like this and at this price point. It's much faster than the S1R Mark II, and you'll get less rolling shutter while you're in those electronic shutter modes, of course, because of this partially stacked sensor. We also now have HEIF or HEIF support, so if you want to swap and use that instead of JPEG, you'll get twice as many photos onto the same amount of storage. This new body design handles really well and is exactly the same as the new S1R Mark II, which was lovely to use for stills, of course. And the viewfinder is excellent. It's one of the best I've ever used on a Panasonic camera. So over in video mode, we have a lot of options. This is a hugely feature-rich camera for video. Panasonic have always been fans of giving us as many options as possible in their cameras, and there's more here than ever before. So I decided to actually count the available record mode options. The MP4 section has 8, the .mov section has 63, and the ProRes option has 50. So in total, that is 121 different recording options which you can do. And that's just the internal recording, and it's ignoring proxy recording entirely. 121 options to choose from. So when you first dive in, of course, that feels really quite overwhelming. The headline features though are 6K up to 60p, ProRes 422 and 422 HQ internally, and even ProRes RAW internally. We also get RAW out over the HDMI port, although when you do turn this on, you lose internal recording. Now that RAW can be read by both Atomos for ProRes RAW or Video Assists for Blackmagic RAW, so that's fantastic to see and surprisingly rare in the industry. Normally you get one or the other. So yes, there are a lot of options, but they're a really nice mixture of very high-end options and very convenient ones, so you can really fine-tune your choice for your current situation. And to combat how overwhelming this all is, there are several tools in the camera. Firstly, you can use this display filtering option to limit this long list down to only the ones which you want to see. That's very handy. But what I would definitely recommend is that you take the time to set up the dedicated My List, where you can get 12 slots to save the record options which you prefer. So for us, I whittled down those 121 options to these 12. 6K 3x2 open gate recordings for being able to crop to either regular 16:9 or vertical video. Then regular DCI high resolution 5.8K in either 25 or 50p, and this is 420 10-bit in H.265. Then 4K DCI 100p slow motion, also 420 10-bit H.265. Then 4K DCI 422 10-bit all-I in both 25p and 50p. And those are likely to be some of the most popular options for most people. Then the same but in long op for smaller file sizes when needed. And lastly, we have 1080p 200 frames a second and the ProRes options, 5.8K 25p ProRes RAW and 25p or 50p 4K DCI in regular ProRes 422. To take this one step further, you can of course use the custom options on the mode dial. Here we have C1 set to 5.8K, C2 is 4K DCI 100p slow motion, C3 is 4K 10-bit all-I 25p, and C4 is the same in 50p. And those are all with 180 degrees shutter to keep motion blur consistent and all the other settings which we prefer to use. Really useful. One smaller frustration, which has been the same on every Lumix camera too, is that they don't really tell you which options are H.265 and which is H.264. You have to find it out for yourself. And that's pretty important as there's still a lot of computers, especially Windows ones, which don't work well with H.265. The simple way which we've found to tell which ones are which is that 420 ones seem to be H.265 and 422 are H.264 based. One of the main frustrations with previous modern Lumix cameras, like the otherwise fantastic S5 Mark IIX for example, was that there was no 4K 120 at all, and there was 4K 60, but it cropped in to 1.5 times. Here we do get 4K 60, even 6K 60, and 4K 120 as well, which is going to make people very happy. 4K and 6K 60p, they have no crop at all, it's full sensor. But the 4K 120, that does have a slight crop, about 1.2 times. And here's what that looks like in practice. It's not much, but it is there. The autofocus works well in 4K slow motion, but we lose subject detection and tracking. And because we can do regular 100p or 120p outside of S&Q mode, you do also get audio recorded. Another very welcome improvement is in the stabilization. So Panasonic have always been very good at IBIS. The Micro Four Thirds cameras have some of the best stabilization on the market, and they rate those as 7.5 stops of IS. Here, they're claiming 8 stops. So that's pretty incredible, really. To test this, we did the same shot with the S1 Mark II and then the S5 Mark II X, which Lumix say has 5 stops of IS. Now this isn't super scientific, they're filmed one after the other rather than at the same time because we've only got one of each lens, but let's just see what differences we can see. Okay, let's now look at dynamic range boost. So this is a simple item in the menu which you can turn on and off, and it will limit the camera down in some areas while boosting the dynamic range. Now, it's not clear what is actually technically happening here. Panasonic haven't really ever explained that, and it's changed its performance from one camera to the next over the years with Panasonic. So it is a bit of a confusing feature, but it does seem simpler in the S1 Mark II than we've seen in previous cameras, and potentially more useful as well. So when you turn dynamic range boost on, you do lose quite a bit of functionality. Firstly, you lose any frame rates above 30p. It greys out every record mode in the menu, which you can't do. You can still do 6K though, and ProRes, even ProRes RAW, which is helpful. You also lose the dual native ISO. In Vlog, the native ISO changes to 1000, and that's the lowest ISO you can use as well. The other negative, which is less obvious when you first turn it on, is that it increases the rolling shutter. But because this new partially stacked sensor is so much faster than what we've previously seen from Lumix, this is less of a problem than it was on other cameras. We did this simple whip pan handheld tests of these trees, and you can see firstly just how good the camera is normally. This was a fast pan, and look how straight those trees are when we pause. And there's very little jello effect as we stop and change direction as well. If we turn dynamic range boost on though, there is definitely a difference. It'll be interesting to see some actual readout speed measurements, but there's a definite diagonal skew on the trees now and some jello, which is uncomfortable to watch when we change direction. It's important to remember though just how extreme this example is. When would you ever move a camera around like this in the real world? It's hard to know for sure, but my gut feeling looking at this footage is that it would be about the same kind of readout speed as we've seen from other Lumix cameras like the S5 Mark II X or S1R Mark II. So this is not going to be something you're likely going to want to turn on all of the time. But if you're in a high dynamic range situation and you don't need slow motion or low light and you aren't moving the camera too much, then this is going to be really useful to have. And it looks great. It makes a big difference to the highlights and keeps the shadows nice and clean still. So it really does improve the image quality in scenes like this quite a lot. I'd love to know a bit more about how they're actually technically achieving it though. We also get a new picture profile, Cinelike A2. Now there are a lot of picture profiles now in Panasonic cameras, and I do wish that they're given this one a bit more of an interesting and different name, as it doesn't exactly stand out in the list when you're cycling through them. But it is definitely a step up over the other options. This is Panasonic's answer to Sony's S-Cinetone and Canon's wide DR. It looks great. The skin tones are fantastic, highlights are maintained well, and it's going to be a great starting point for quick turnaround work. Perhaps the new feature I'm most pleased to see is 32-bit float audio recording internally. Panasonic are the first camera company to be doing this, and it is so welcome. And it works here exactly the same way as it did on the GH7. So you do need the XLR2 add-on for the top in order to enable this. And it records it internally, simply as part of the video file, in the exact same way as regular 24-bit audio is recorded. There's no separate files to sync up or anything like that. It is just as easy to work with in post as any other camera is. But you get the flexibility of 32-bit float audio. Now, whenever we talk about 32-bit float on the channel, people start to counter with all kinds of comments about how you need high-quality microphones or dual analog to digital converters in order to take advantage of the wider dynamic range. And that is true, you know, I'm not going to argue with that. But the wider dynamic range inside one set record level isn't really why our customers are particularly interested in 32-bit float for the most part. It's so that you can pretty much just forget about your audio record levels and still end up with perfect audio, even with very modest and ordinary microphones. And recording your audio inside a camera like this, that is where that is at its most useful. This is something I would love to see on every single camera out there. But let's see if we can set up a quick example to actually show you what I mean. Okay, so let's demonstrate this 32-bit float audio recording. So this isn't 32-bit float right now, this is normal 24-bit recorded with the correct audio levels, if you like, what we would normally set our audio levels to. And what you're listening to is not an exceptional microphone. This is the Hollyland Lark M2S. So this is a microphone that we use for our work, but this is sort of the entry-level microphone which we normally use. So I've done this on purpose so that we can sort of demonstrate, you know, yes, you get the most out of 32-bit float when you're recording with wide dynamic range and using exceptional microphones with amazing low noise floors inside, but this is still useful for ordinary audio recording as well. So this is what it's been sounding like with 24-bit. And now we've changed to 32-bit. So nothing else has changed. All the audio levels are exactly the same, but you're now listening to 32-bit float audio rather than 24-bit. But that was with the correct audio levels. So if you can't tell that much of a difference, that's why. So let's now change that. So we're back to 24-bit now, and we've recorded the levels way too low on purpose. So you'll be listening to this with the audio levels brought back up in post, and it should be a little bit noisier. You should hear an awful lot more of what's going on around me because we've under-recorded the audio by quite a bit to show what happens with normal audio recording when something goes wrong. And now we're back to 32-bit float. So nothing else has changed. The audio levels are all the same microphone's the same, the environment's the same, but now we're in 32-bit audio. So can you tell a difference? And do I sound any different to how I did before? So that's with the volume recorded way too low. Let's now do the same thing, but with the audio recorded way too high. So now we've got the audio maxed out. I'm speaking at the exact same volume, but Ben has just cranked that volume slider all the way up, and we're in 24-bit ordinary audio. So I imagine I'm going to be sounding quite distorted. This is really straying into whoops, I've messed up territory with audio levels. And now this is the exact same thing in 32-bit float. So the same audio record levels completely maxed out, but we've brought the audio back down to the same level. So can you tell any difference? Does this sound like good quality audio or does it not? And does it sound any different really to what it did right at the beginning when audio levels were set correctly? Another big new feature that we need to talk about is Arri Log 3 support. Now this isn't in the camera just yet, so I sadly can't show it to you. It's going to be enabled in a firmware update and it will be a paid upgrade. So it's the same license key as it is on the GH7, which costs £179. But if you want to, you can pay for that upgrade, install it, and install Arri Log format into the camera as one of the picture profile options. Panasonic have worked with Arri to map the sensor into Arri Log C3, and that's pretty amazing really. Now, it's not going to necessarily improve your image quality. This doesn't turn your S1 Mark II into an Arri camera. Vlog is a great log format already, and the sensor is the sensor. But Arri Log format is very easy to work with, and the color science is fantastic. So it could well be worth it for normal use. And obviously, if you're matching the S1 Mark II with an Arri camera, then this is really useful to have. Now, let's talk about autofocus. So this is Panasonic's phase detect autofocus system, which is just getting better and better. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say it's beating Canon or Sony yet, but it definitely competes nowadays. The subject tracking is fast and snappy for stills and smooth and reliable in video. The main new improvements here is that we now get continuous autofocus in high frame rate modes for video like 4K 120 or 1080 240. Although we don't get subject tracking in those modes, it's just regular whole area autofocus. There's also a new subject detection mode, which is one which we've never seen before. Panasonic are calling this urban sports mode, and it tracks street dance, freestyle football, skateboarding, BMX and parkour. Now, we haven't really had time to test this. There's not that much parkour going on in these woods, but I imagine YouTube is going to be full of skateboarders and people jumping over rooftops testing this out. It does make sense in this camera specifically though, because that new faster sensor is going to be perfect for that kind of work, definitely in video, but also in stills with that fast 70 frames a second bursts in electronic shutter mode. A small improvement, but one I'm always incredibly happy to see, is the addition of false color. So you can map this to an assignable button. We've used the exposure compensation button for when we're in video mode, and this is by far my favorite way to expose while working, especially in fast-paced and unpredictable environments. Lots of brands are starting to add this now, which I'm so pleased about. Canon have it in their mirrorless cameras. Now Panasonic have, just waiting on Sony now. There are so many clever, smaller features in here. There's far too many to list all of them comprehensively in this video, but there were 3 more which I really wanted to mention because they caught my eye. The first is a really simple but very useful one. You can now plug in an SSD drive and choose to copy everything from one of your card slots across to it, all from the camera. You can back up on the go with it. That is very useful. And it's one of those features which, once you hear it, you kind of wonder, why isn't that commonplace? Why doesn't just every single camera do that? It seems really obvious. The second is that you can wirelessly sync timecode in the camera with Atomos's UltraSync Blue products. So with one of those, you can send the timecode signal it's creating wirelessly to these cameras over Bluetooth and just sync them all up without any extra kit needed. And the third is that these cameras now have UVC protocol in them. So you can just connect this to your computer over USB-C and the computer will see it as a webcam just straight away with no extra faff needed. So before we wrap up, we need to discuss the S1IIE, as we have 2 new camera bodies today, not just one. While the S1II is definitely the main event here, the S1IIE is still very interesting. This is a stepped back entry point, hence the E I guess, to the S1 lineup. So it's still higher end than the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX, but it's not as powerful as the S1 Mark II and the S1R Mark II. So lots here is the same. The exact same body design, same stabilization system, so 8 stops, internal ProRes and ProRes RAW, 32-bit audio, Arri Log support, and a lot of those other features which we mentioned as well. But what's different is the sensor. So this is not a partially stacked sensor. It's a 24 megapixel sensor with 14 plus stops of dynamic range instead of 15 plus stops. And it's very similar in specs to the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX. So although Panasonic hasn't confirmed that, yeah, I imagine it's going to be the same sensor. So compared to the S5 Mark IIX, you gain a huge amount of new functionality, new features, but compared to the S1 Mark II, you don't get that fast readout speed. This also means the frame rates are lower, so no 4K 120. You do get both 6K and 4K at 60p with no crop, surprisingly, but strangely, this is limited to the 2.4:1 widescreen aspect ratio, so might well not actually be that useful for you, depending on your work. So think of the S1 Mark IIe as an interesting halfway house, if you like, between the S5 Mark IIX and the S1 Mark II. So there we go. We now have a new Lumix S1 family. The S1 Mark II, S1 Mark IIe, and S1R Mark II. And the S1 Mark II is now the most full, well-rounded pro hybrid camera which Lumix make, offering so many things which set it apart from its competition, but also some completely unique features like 32-bit flow audio and Arri Log C3 support. The only other mirrorless cameras which support those is the GH7. So now we have a full frame L-mount camera which can do all of that. There is a bit of a question looming over all of this, which I imagine quite a few of you will have in your mind, and that's, what about the S1H? What would an S1H Mark II look like, and is that around the corner? And who knows? I'd love to see an S1H Mark II, and I think there's definitely place in this lineup for a sort of $3 to $4 grand flagship video focused model, Perhaps a fully stacked sensor, larger fans, higher resolution, 4K 120 with no crop. There's lots that they could do with it, if they do. But as of now, that doesn't exist. And this S1 Mark II is a really feature-rich video camera already. In my opinion, this is without a doubt the best Lumix camera that they've made to date. But what do you think? Let us know in the comment section, and if you want to pre-order one of these for yourself, of course, head over to proav.co.uk. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.